Good evening. Due to the COVID-19 emergency, tonight's Committee of Adjustment hearing is being held by video conference and live stream video on the town's live stream webpage at oakville.ca. This is a hearing to consider applications for minor variance and consents held under the authority of the Planning Act. Please keep in mind the intent of this process is to review the application that is before the committee, listen to the evidence, and then make a decision. This process is not intended to be used to resolve any concerns or disputes that may exist between the town, individuals, or organizations. If a request for a deferral is made and the committee grants such a request, the applicant or authorized agent must contact the Secretary Treasurer to schedule a new hearing date. In order to conduct an effective and efficient electronic hearing, we have adopted the following process. If you are watching the live stream of this hearing at oakville.ca and if you wish to speak to an item on the agenda, you can call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. The phone number will also be posted on your screen below the live stream at oakville.ca. Staff will be standing by to take your call, and you will be provided with further instructions to join the video conference at that time. You will be asked for your name and number of the item that you wish to address and your telephone number. When the chair of the committee polls for interested parties, the Secretary Treasurer will unmute you when it is time for you to speak. The applicant or agent will be given the opportunity to briefly explain to the committee the basis of the application and answer any questions that may arise. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided for presentation. Your full name and address will be required for the record, and any submission beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. All delegations must also state their full name and address for the record. A maximum of 5 minutes will be provided to make their presentation. All remarks and questions are to be directed to the chair, and any submissions beyond the 5 minutes will be at the discretion of the committee. The applicant or agent will then be provided with a further 5 minutes to respond to comments made by interested parties and answer questions to the committee members. And if the applicant or agent has any concerns found in staff report, particularly any proposed conditions, at that time it will be the time for you to advise us. The matter will then be taken into committee for a decision, and that will mark the end of all discussion. Any person desiring a notice of decision for an application must provide a written request, preferably through email, to the Secretary Treasurer. Please note that you must make a written request in order to be included on the list that is issued by the local planning appeal tribunal for the giving of any subsequent notice of any appeal. Written notice of the committee's decision will be mailed no later than 10 days for minor variance and 15 days for consent applications. The applicant, agent, and any other person who has filed such a written request for notice. If you do not agree with the committee's decision, you may appeal this to the local planning appeal tribunal, and the last day to appeal the decision to the local planning appeal tribunal will be noted on the decision. If no appeal is received within the prescribed time frame, the decision of the committee becomes final and binding, and the Secretary will then notify the applicant and anyone who has received a copy of the decision through written correspondence. People participating in this hearing are to be courteous to and respectful of the members of the committee, town staff, and other people participating in the electronic hearing. Tonight's electronic hearing is being video recorded and available for future viewing at oakville.ca. Thank you. Okay, we have a full, I don't see Mr. Talowski. Is he with us?
Madam Chair, I saw him, and
I know he has a declaration of a pecuniary interest, but I'm just trying to find out.
He's here.
It's not the first one, is it?
No, it's not. He's here.
Oh, there he is. Okay, very good. Let me just pull everything up. I'm sorry, just bear with me for a second. My computer is on the fritz tonight, so.
That is fine.
Okay. I'm trying to work off a laptop and a phone and an iPad, and it's still not working. Let's hope this works. Okay. All right, so we have no regrets this evening. And I know Mr. Tlowski has one declaration of pecuniary interest, and that is for, can you help me out so I don't have to get out of this screen?
Madam Chair, it's ironically, I've been on Zoom calls all day. As soon as the meeting started, it started acting up on me. Madam Chair, I'm going to declare a conflict of interest on CAV A068 at 3279 Carding Mill Trail. Declare that interest out of abundance of caution. My company is working on a zoning application with the town, which has similar requirements of the town.
Okay, very well. Thank you, Mr. Tlowski. Noted. 068. Any other declaration of pecuniary interests? Okay, I see none. We do have a deferral here. So I'll take deferrals if the agents are present. You can unmute them, Ms. Secretary Treasurer, please.
Good evening, Madam Chair. It's Jason Heater from HDS 12. On behalf of clients at 305 Morrison Road, I'd like to ask the committee for a deferral. We've been in touch with the local residents association or group, and I think we have an opportunity to rework this, the scale of this project a little bit and bring it more in line and in keeping with their wishes as well as planning staff. So with your permission, I'd like to seek a deferral if possible.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Heather. It's always good when we're working with the community and trying to establish the best possible outcome for everyone. Any questions of Mr. Heather at this time? Okay, members, I'm in your hands. All those in favor of a deferral? Okay, your application has been deferred. You'll let the Secretary Treasurer know when you're ready and she'll get you on to the next available agenda.
Wonderful, thank you all.
Have a good night.
You too.
Who is next? I have application 072 at 129 Glaxton Drive. Is the agent present for this one?
Yes, it's Gus Ricci.
Hello, Mr. Ricci. You're seeking a deferral for this application?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. We're seeking a deferral for 129 Claxton. We've received the planning comments, and there's some concerns on comments with respect to residential floor area. And I understand there's also a few letters of objections from some of the neighboring property owners. So we'd like the opportunity to address the comments and possibly meet with the neighbors that have shown some concern on the application. So we ask for deferral to the next available date or whenever that can be made available.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Ricci. Any questions or comments at this time from members of the committee? Okay, all those in support of a deferral? Okay, your application has been deferred.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
All right, so the first matter on our agenda is application CAV 066 of 2021 at 302 Douglas Avenue. Again, it's application CEV 066 of 2021 at 302 Douglas Avenue. If you're interested in speaking to this application, please call the number 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. I have Mr. David Nelson listed here as the agent. Is he with us?
Good evening, Madam Chair, members of the committee, Madam Secretary, Mr. Hassan. Thank you very much. I have read the staff report and I have no issues with respect to the two conditions. I wish to thank Mr. Hassan at this point for his help in working forward on this application. We have been back and forth a number of times, and I'm pleased to see the staff report. I have no further comments at this time. I don't believe there are any neighbors who are interested in this project. My client did reach out to a number of his neighbors, and I think you did see a couple of letters of support for this particular application. I'm also pleased to see that council has moved forward with revisions to the Mother Bylaw 2014-14, in particular with respect to the residential floor area, lot area ratio, which has over time been a problematic issue.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Nelson. Are there any questions of Mr. Nelson at this time regarding this application for a new two-story detached dwelling with the maximum RFA and lot coverage variances? Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you to town staff, not a question for Mr. Nelson. However, perhaps staff would like to share with the public the change to the bylaw that gives some context for Mr. Nelson's comments. Thank you very much.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, there was an amendment made through a housekeeping amendment to the parent bylaw, as Mr. Nelson had noted. If the committee recalls, 2 or 3 meeting cycles ago, there was an application we had on Chamberlain Lane where it was picked up that there was additional area in regards to the definition of residential floor area and the regulations of the bylaw that included space above the garage that wouldn't be normally counted as floor area. But because of the way that the roof is designed and the height of the roof in that particular instance, the garage area has to be included. So staff had found that this had been a reoccurring issue, and it doesn't really result in any mass or scale implications or impacts to the streetscape or abutting property. So staff felt it was a housekeeping amendment that should be made to normalize the more architectural features that are causing the irregularity in the bylaw and the cause for variances.
Very well, thank you for that clarification. Any comments or questions from the members of the committee to either? Okay, very well. I'm ready for a motion. Who would like to move? Go ahead, Mr. Flemington.
Madam Chair, having reviewed the
hold on, Mr. Flemington, there's a really bad echo. Does
Yeah,
anyone
from
else hear it, or is it just me?
Yeah.
Okay.
I've heard it sounds like he has a sore throat.
Yeah, it sounds like you have a frog in your throat, actually.
Yes.
Do you want to try? Yeah.
just one sec.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes,
Is that better?
that's much better. Go ahead.
Okay. Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Having reviewed the application, also having taken into account the comments made by the applicant's agent this evening, noting that the staff's report was in support of the application, and also noting that there are 2 letters of support for the application. I am prepared to move a motion in favor of the application as applied for, finding that it meets all the 4 tests of the Planning Act. I would like to include the following 2 conditions: that the dwelling be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings dated March 2nd, 2021. And then our standard condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, Mr. Nelson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Good evening.
Madam Secretary, none opposed. Okay. The next application on our agenda is 067 of 2021 at 80 Ennisclare Drive East. Again, it's 067 of 2021 at 80 Ennisclare Drive East. If you are interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095, and staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. I have Mr. William Outred here for this application. Is he with us?
Yes, Madam Chair.
Good evening.
Madam Chair.
Good evening. We see you. Yes, we see you. Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. Once again, I
think we're having a-
apologize.
okay. Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Outred. Mr. Outred, your microphone is echoing, so it's very difficult to hear you.
Okay, I'm gonna turn my video off. Can you hear me now? Okay.
It's a little bit better, yes.
Madam Chair, can you hear? I apologize. I should
we
be
can
taking these
can,
night
No.
meetings at my office where I have good internet. We're up in the country. Can you hear me okay?
We can, but you're cutting in and out.
Madam Chair?
So yeah, I can hear you. You're just cutting in and out. So if we lose you, I'll ask you to repeat, okay? Can you hear us, Mr. Outred?
Okay, I'll be very brief. I can hear you well.
Okay.
So let me just go forward, Madam Chair.
Go ahead.
Stop me if you can't hear me. Yes, thank you. This is an application at 80 Ennisclare Drive East, around 6 variances. What they are doing they are adding or enclosing an existing rear porch behind the house that was approved back in 2013 when the house was originally built. There's also an of the property. What the first 3 variances are requesting is basically to legalize the rooftop terrace above the covered porch that is going to be enclosed. So variances 1, 2, and 3 are basically just to regularize the fact that there is a rooftop terrace above what now is going to be an extension, an enclosed extension of the actual home. So by all accounts, I believe variances 1, 2, and 3, once again, are just regularization items. We're also looking for residential floor area. The addition of the covered porch being enclosed adds about, I believe it was 24. There was a committee of adjustment approved in 2013 for a 33.75% residential floor area. So it increases it to 38.53%. Furthermore, there is a coverage of variance. Basically, this is at 29.19%, whereas, of course, 25% is required. This is as a result of the addition of last variance is for the accessory building located in the rear yard. The setbacks, if you note on the property just to the north, there's a accessory building almost exactly the same location with similar setbacks. So we feel there's no issue pertaining to the location of it. Planning is in support of the variances. I agree with the two conditions, and I'd like to thank Brandon for his help in working with us with this application, because I think initially there was some issues, got rid of a terrace and so forth to accommodate Brandon's supportive comments. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Outer. Are there any questions of Mr. Outer at this time, or items of clarification? I see none. Okay, Madam Secretary, if no one has called in for this application, seeking to speak to it, then we can move forward and take the matter into committee.
Madam Chair, maybe you should again repeat the telephone number and wait a couple seconds before we get anybody like.
Sure, the number is 905-815-6095. If you're interested in speaking to this application as ATN Clare Drive East, which is a CAV 067 of 2021, we are standing by for another minute or so.
We don't have anybody to call.
Okay, very well. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Tulowski, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'll move that this application be approved as applied for, finding that it meets the 4 tests of the Planning Act. And note that the application is largely a result of existing situations and an accessory building of similar size and location on the adjacent property. I'd also note that there's no objection from the community. I would make that approval subject to the additions and cabana being built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings, reference 4, dated 03/18/21, and that the approval expires within 2 years if a building permit has not been issued.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Tulowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you. And none opposed. Good night, Mr. Outred.
Thank you. Good night.
Okay, the next item on our agenda is CAV 068 of 2021 at 3279 Carding Mill Trail. Again, it's CAV 068 of 2021 at 3279 Carding Mill Trail. Anyone who's interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. Thank you. Good evening, Ms. McEwen. How are you?
Evening.
Go ahead. The presentation is up and ready.
Great. Good evening. My name is Catherine McEwen from Corsia Flemington Planning. I'm here on behalf of Natalie. Next slide, please. Subject lands are located at the northeast corner of Carding Mill Trail and North Park Drive within the preserved neighborhood in North Oakville. Next slide, please.
I think we're having trouble with our audio. Is this coming from your end? Now this is the third person that it's echoing. Is there something you can do on your end, Ms. McEwen?
It seems to be okay here. I'm plugging into the headset.
To Madam Chair, I
Yes.
have to stop for a second and put Michael in the because Michael Talowski has conflict of interest. Can you wait for a second
Yes.
until?
Yes, sure,
Yeah, thank
sure,
you.
yes.
So while we're waiting, is that any better now that I'm on a headset?
Yeah, I think that is better.
Okay.
Yeah, it's all done. Thank you, Sherry.
Yeah, I apologize. I thought you had done that before I started. Okay, go ahead, Ms. McEwen.
Thank you. So the lands are identified as Block 299 on the registered plan and are municipally known as 3279 Carding Mill Trail. Next slide, please. We're requesting minor variances to permit dwelling units along Carding Mill Trail, whereas Section 815.3A and D and Special Site Figure 851.1 require non-residential uses on this portion of the block. Next slide, please. In September of last year, we submitted a site plan application that proposed 2 5-story buildings with approximately 148 units and approximately 7,000 square feet of commercial space. Plan conform to the zoning. Next slide, please. This was the proposed renderings for the building from September 2020. As you can see, the view from the southwest illustrates the commercial space along Carding Mill, and the view from the northwest illustrates the northerly building. At the end of last year, Councillors Parmar and Sandu reached out to Madame with some comments on the proposal, and these included the proposed amount of commercial space. Next slide, please. In March of this year, we revised a site plan and submitted it to the town that addressed comments from the councillors. The revised plan includes approximately 151 residential units and just over 4,000 square feet of commercial space. We're proposing 4 residential units where the special sections of the bylaw require the non-residential uses. Next slide. In addition to proposing to reduce the amount of commercial space, the buildings have been modified to include terracing after the second story at the corner of North Park and Carding Mill, and the building has been set back further from North Park. As well, the articulation of the building wall along Carding Mill has been enhanced. The rendering illustrates the proposed 4,000 square feet of commercial space at the corner that will contribute to the animation of this intersection. Next slide, please. The North Oakville secondary plan identifies 14 neighborhoods. The plan outlines that each neighborhood should provide walkable streets, a variety of housing types, and a central activity node that's located within a 5-minute walk of the entire neighborhood. Within each neighborhood, the higher density mixed-use neighborhood center areas and activity nodes are generally located along the corridors and then transition to general urban and suburban areas. Next slide, please. This neighborhood activity node is located at the intersection of Carding Mill and North Park, which shifted south slightly through when the design of Munns Channel was finalized. Next slide, please. The secondary plan policies require that one mixed use or non-residential building be provided at the intersection of each activity node. The proposed mixed use building exceeds the requirements of the official plan. Next slide, please. The draft plan was submitted in 2015. There were some revisions and it was approved in November of 2016. At this time, targeted densities were not being achieved and the variety of mixed-use buildings were not being delivered at activity nodes. Next slide, please. In order to ensure a greater mix of building types and a more viable activity mode, a minimum height requirement of 4 stories and a minimum requirement for retail, commercial, or community uses was included in the site-specific zoning for the 2 blocks at the corner of Cardinal and North Park. Next slide, please. The intent of the bylaw is to ensure sufficient commercial and non-residential uses are provided at grade within the activity node. The proposed plan achieves this. The proposed variance to reduce the commercial space by approximately 3,000 feet will provide a more viable commercial space for this location, and the increase of 4 residential units will have little, if any, impact on the streetscape. That concludes my presentation. I'd be happy to do my best to answer any questions you might have. Oh, that was kind of the end. These ones are just in case questions come up. You can go back.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Ms. Murray. We'll start open up the questions.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to our presenter. So it's just to see if I've got this right. Originally it used to be 7,000 square feet of commercial, and then it's been moved to 4,000 square feet of commercial. And it's based on comments from Pamar and Sandu. And what were those concerns? You indicated their concerns, but I didn't hear what they were.
From what I understand, they had heard concerns from the community about the amount of commercial space that was being proposed. We did have an informal public meeting last week with the councillors and members of public, as well as the mayor, to discuss this application.
And what are the concerns?
The concerns, from what I understand, was that there was too much commercial space.
Okay, if I could have a follow-up question to town staff, I'm wondering if town staff could respond. As the applicant knows, the town staff and the comments indicate they are not in support of these variances. So I would like to hear a little bit more from town staff, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, it must be something going on throughout the town in terms of internet. I keep getting booted in and out, so I actually missed the first portion of your question. I caught Ms. McEwen's explanation for your latter question regarding a meeting that was held. Unfortunately, I wasn't part of that meeting, so I can't really speak to those details of that conversation if that's what the question is surrounding.
It's also surrounding the concerns from the neighbors with respect to the commercial space. Feel free to clarify, Ms. Murray, if you'd like.
Thank you. So a follow-up through you, Madam Chair, for town staff. There were concerns that there was too much commercial space now at the 4,000 square foot mark. But staff, I note in your staff comments that notwithstanding, the variances are not supportive. So there's not much meat on the bones to say we just think there's too much commercial. So I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the revision from 7,000 to 4,000 and where we are now at 4,000 and sticking to that plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair. In relation to the resident comments, I did get copied on a number of them, and I believe there is varying levels of concern. Some residents were actually in support of maintaining a certain level of commercial activity within this mixed-use development, and then some obviously were not. From a town perspective, from a staff position, staff are satisfied through the previous approvals back going to 2016 that there is adequate commercial activity in this general activity node as it relates to the broader surrounding residential population. So in terms of the full build out of this community itself within the North Preserve, in the fullness of time, we feel that having this programmed non-residential space is definitely a key component to the neighborhood, especially noting that if the amount of commercial area is decreased, it prevents or limits the amount of deviation that you can have in terms of unit sizes. So that flexibility to a degree is also lost when you minimize the number of commercial space.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other questions or comments before we take a note from the public? I do note that we do have 6 letters of opposition, and there are several members from the public who've asked to attend. So, Madam Secretary Treasurer, who is lined up to speak to the committee on this application?
Madam Chair, I can see on my screen Mr. Michael Smith is online right now, but also if you can repeat from the attendees who wants to speak, they need to raise a hand who wants to speak in regards to the application.
Okay. Again, we're looking at application CAV 068 of 2021 at 3279 Carding Mill Trail. If you are watching on the live stream and you'd like to speak to this application, the number to call is 905-815-6095. And if you are in attendance and you would like to speak to this application, you have to raise your hand so that the Secretary Treasurer can invite you in as an attendee and you can address the committee at that time. So I have Michael and Mira Smith. I see them. Do you wish to address the committee? You
yes,
are
please. Can you,
on phone. You are on phone, correct?
Can you hear me? Yes, I'm on the phone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Yeah.
Go
yes,
ahead.
Good evening. I have a question with regards to the secondary entrance, which is adjacent to laneway 174. Kids constantly play in behind this laneway, and the secondary entrance runs right into this laneway, which I think is going to be very dangerous, and there's going to be accidents, frankly. And so I'm wondering if the laneway can be moved around to Harold Dent, as opposed to, or the entrance rather, can be moved over to Harold Dent, as opposed to right in front of the laneway, which looks extremely dangerous to me.
Okay, very well, Mr. Smith. This is the procedure. You have 5 minutes to tell us all your concerns, and then in the meantime, Ms. McEwen is taking note of that, and then she will have the time to respond to your concerns and for us to get you answers. So is this the only concern that you have at this time? Because I'd like to hear from the other members of the public so that Ms. McEwen can address your concerns, and then the committee can take the matter into discussion.
Well, I have other concerns that this is a community, and we're putting in a big condo right next door to us, which we're not happy about. But I understand this is already approved, and there's not much complaining I can do. I've done my hard work with Yvonne. She's been excellent, and she's been very supportive. But what I'm really concerned about right now, Madam Chairperson, excuse me, is that making sure that this entranceway is safe. That's my biggest concern. Of course, living where I do, I don't want these condos here, but I understand this has been approved in 2016 when no one lived here, which I don't like the process. But I will say, what we have to do now is make it right and make it safe and make sure it's as beautiful as we can, because this is a beautiful area right in front of the pond. So my concern is about the safety of children who play on that laneway, and I would like to make sure that we move that slightly over, and I think it's a minor variance to do that. So that's the only concern I have, and thank you for listening to me this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, has anyone else signed in to or put up their hand to speak to Ms. McEwen? Or sorry, to address the committee?
Yes, I do have Mr. Brian. I'm just promoting Mr. Brian Pemblant and Mr. Sadko. If you can see from your screen.
Brian Pemberton?
Correct.
And who else did you say? I don't see anyone else.
Mr. Sadigov.
Hi, can you hear me?
Who is speaking right now? Oh, Mr. Sadkov.
Yeah, my name is Elyar Sadigov.
Go ahead, Mr. Sadikov.
Oh, hi. Just a quick question. So, obviously, we moved in last year. We bought a house from Flemington. We were not told that about this planning, about this construction. We are concerned about the safety. We are concerned about a couple of different things. The fact that you are building a 5-story building. It's a quiet community. It's like a small neighborhood. Surrounded by a bunch of single detached houses. So now it is understandable that at this point nothing can be done. But my other concern is this. So now you do realize that the value of my property will drop if, let's say, eventually next year or in a couple of years from now, I do decide to sell my house. So because of this 5-story building, there will be a significant drop in the value of my house. So this is a very big thing for me.
Yeah, unfortunately, the Committee of Adjustment doesn't have any bearing on the approval of these projects. We are here to discuss the 2 variances that are before us for the ancillary residential use and the commercial space. So those are the things that we have to consider tonight. And I can understand and sympathize with you. I live in a neighborhood that the same thing exactly happened to me when I bought my house. We were not told that there was going to be commercial space in front of us. In fact, we were told it was a residential development, and a couple of years later things changed and it was said and done, and we did the same thing as yourself. So while I sympathize, I have to just make sure that you understand that this application is here before us for our consideration on only those 2 variances, and those are the only things that we can really weigh in on. And I can get you information on things like the question that Mr. Smith asked about moving the secondary entrance. We will have, as a committee, questions of Ms. McEwen ourselves, but really anything aside from that, we have no bearing on. So while I understand your frustration, I do apologize that there's really nothing in our hands that we can do about that.
Sure.
And I do appreciate your submission.
Thank you.
Okay, and I have Mr. Brian Pemberton as well on the line.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, I live right beside Allier, where a townhouse of 3 sold by Remington. I'll make it short and sweet because I understand that there's really nothing you guys can do. The building's going to go up regardless. There's no relenting on the building. Is that correct?
That's correct. The other things.
Yeah,
go
we're
ahead.
Basically wasting all of your time and asking questions. I just want to know what the premises and all the developers that are involved from Remington through to all the other ones, why we were not informed. We were given maps and pictures and everything else. I wouldn't have bought here at all having one a 5-story building was right there. And I know perhaps you can answer the question, perhaps you can't, but do not real estate agents and realtors have an obligation to tell you what's going on? Because we were presented all residential neighborhood.
I don't have a direct answer for you. I expected the same thing when I bought my house, and so I know they should have an obligation to disclose everything, and maybe Ms. McEwen can have some comments to say, since they've had this application in the works for a while, and perhaps town staff may have something to shed on that as well.
I want to know who owns sorry, Madam Chair, I want to know who owns the building as well. I may have not done enough research before this meeting, but I've been busy boy, so.
What do you mean who owns the building? The actual...
Who's putting it up?
Oh, okay.
Where's the money coming
from? Okay. Anything else before I take this matter into committee and provide Ms. McEwen her time to respond to all your concerns?
That's it for me. Nothing else.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, is there anyone else who's raised their hand or has called in since then to speak to this matter?
Madam Chair, we do have a Jennifer Brainston, and I asked her to unmute, so hopefully she...
Sorry, can you pronounce that again? Jennifer who?
Jennifer Brassington.
Okay. Ms. Bressington, are you online?
Yes. Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay, hi everyone. I would like to echo what my fellow neighbor, Mr. Smith, had mentioned earlier today. Very unsatisfied with the fact that there's going to be a building close to us. And, you know, I've lived in Oakville my whole life. And I actually lived and grew up in a Mattamy home. So I grew up trusting that Mattamy would create a beautiful community for me to live and to raise my family. And I was very unsatisfied to hear that we would be living in front of a building when we found out. But we thought it was going to be a live-work loft, which is what, when we purchased the property, that's what was basically presented to us, was that it was going to be a live-work loft. When my neighbor moved in, he also thought it was going to be a live-work loft. So I don't know, you know, I am very unsatisfied in the fact that it wasn't really communicated to us. When we purchased, it was 2017, and we found out in 2016 this was already in place, this type of planning. So they knew already what was going to be there. So when they were selling to us, why weren't they more transparent with what it was going to be? Because had I known, we wouldn't have purchased, and we wouldn't be in this position right now.
I understand.
Yeah, and then the other thing, I found out also that we can't do anything. So going forward, I'm wondering if, you know, we can have more trees, more green space, because I actually went around and drove around Oakville to see buildings, you know, like in Glen Abbey, they're set back. So no matter how they looked better because they have a lot of green space around. So can we have more green space as well? Can we set the building back, make it smaller? And is there anything we can do about the building to the west? Because that has not been built. To my knowledge, it's going to take a few more years for it to be built. So is there any way we can change up that to be something smaller, to be something like less of a condo and more of like a townhome type complex, or like a live-work loft, which is what we thought it was going to be anyway?
Okay, I've noted your comments, and I'm sure Ms. McEwen can answer these questions. Anything else?
Yeah, so I guess my focus is really on the west, the building to the west also. It's just, is there anything we can do now, because we have the time to work on it? And is there anything I can do as a resident to ensure that it's going to go up? It's going to be a beautiful, whatever it is, it's going to be beautiful.
Okay. All right, thank you for your submission.
Madam Chair.
Ms. Secretary Treasurer, is there anyone else?
As far as I can see, nobody's there, but can you ask Ms. Jennifer Brasnon for the address? I do have for all others except for her.
Okay. Ms. Brastington, can you give us your address for the record, please, and spell your last name?
Brassington.
And your address, please?
Sure, it's 278 North Park Boulevard.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. McEwen, I realize that you did have some dialogue with the neighborhoods, so you've heard some concerns. I'm just wondering, where are you in terms of the site planning process, and whether these neighbors are going to have a say in how things are developed? And can you please comment on the definitive nature of what has been approved so far? Because there seems to be a lot of confusion as to where you are and where you're heading. And while this is not the place or venue for it, I'd just like to have them get some information and some clarity.
Sure.
So maybe it's helpful if we pull up bear with me, slide 13.
While I understand your frustration, I do.
So as I mentioned, what is identified as block 1 in the zoning has minimum height requirements of 4 stories and maximum heights requirements of 5 stories. And the only uses permitted on the first floor are retail, commercial, or community uses, which is why we're kind of before you this evening, because a little bit south of that limit of block 1, we're requesting to reduce that space to provide residential uses there. So I'm not sure if that answers the zoning question. In terms of block 300, which is the one on the west side of Harding Mill, the zoning is in place, and technically we're required to provide a minimum of 4 stories with retail on the ground floor.
And did Mattamy have the knowledge of this beforehand?
Yes. This information was included in agreements of purchase and sale for both Mattamy and Remington. We've got both of those, and unfortunately, it's up to the seller. They're supposed to relay that information when they're selling their homes. So original purchasers would have that information, but someone who bought it, unfortunately, if the previous purchaser who bought it off the developer didn't relay that information, that's kind of where the disconnect often comes.
So definitely, if the residents bought from the developer and they were told it was a liftwork loft, that's not the case, and they should be taking their grievances with the developer.
Well, in the agreement of purchase and sale, it did have a warning clause that these blocks could be developed with up to 5 stories.
Okay, with up to 5 stories.
Minimum 4 and max 5. Sorry.
Okay, and who is the owner of the current development of these blocks?
Block 299 and block 300, these 2 blocks are owned by Mattamy.
And then in terms of the questions about the laneway that is adjacent to the second entrance, as well as the setbacks and green space, do you have any comments on these? I suspect that these have already been dealt with, or you're still about to deal with them in site planning?
So perhaps if we go to slide 15. This is the landscape plan. As you can see, a secondary access, which is intended only for garbage and fire, which of course we can't police who's going to come in, but it's not anticipated, that is not anticipated to be a primary access at all. The majority of traffic will be coming off of Harding Mill. The underground garage is kind of directly that way. So that's, of course, we can't police it, but it's intended for only a secondary access. This location did result through urban design comments with town staff, because we originally had proposed garbage right off of Harold Dent, and that was not welcomed.
Okay, very well. I think we've answered all of the questions. I want to turn it over to my colleagues on the Committee of Adjustment, because as you are aware, the town staff is not in support of those 2 variances, and we've heard your part, and I just wonder if there are any other questions or follow-up for either Ms. McEwen or Mr. Hassan at this time. Go ahead, Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you to the applicant's agent. And thank you for your presentation. I'm just trying to understand why they are requiring these variances. So essentially, they're moving it from a commercial use on the first floor, and then they're looking for it to be residential, if I'm understanding this correctly. When when the zoning and what was planned for that neighborhood was to have, as you demonstrated on the first floor, those other uses. And why I ask that question is, I understand that you know, the first purchasers of those homes in the agreement of purchase and sale would have been advised as to what was being built there. But I'm kind of seeing that in the event that this was commercial uses, as well as the community uses and the other things mentioned there, then these people in the neighborhood would also receive a benefit from this project in that area. So I'm just curious as to why they're asking for these variances.
So in order to address the council's concerns, which included the reduction in commercial space and the which we addressed through this revised concept and the articulation along Harding Hill, so we're still providing a viable commercial space, 4,000 square feet. The revised rendering, I think, looks better than the original one. And that's kind of how we ended up where we're at today.
Thank you. And a follow-up, Madam Chair, through you to town staff, to Mr. Hassan. You know, based on that response, was this a project where we or the town or who have you was looking to reduce the amount of commercial spaces on that project? So therefore, a result of accommodating that, you know, is partially what we see in front of us at the moment.
Through Madam Chair, again, I think going back to my second or third response to a similar question, unfortunately, I wasn't involved in any of those discussions if they were had. When I received the file, I just reviewed the application as it was submitted and took input from commenting staff at the time. So the comments reflect what my knowledge was of the proposal based on the cover letter, the drawings, and the site plan submission. So like I said, unfortunately, I can't speak to those other discussions that were had regarding the reduction of commercial space.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hassan. Any further questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Let's open the matter for discussion. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Ms. Murray.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission, as well as the town's staff report, which I note that the staff is not in support of, also having taken into account the comments by the applicant this evening, and noting that there were a number of neighbors that took the time to express their displeasure with the Mattamy development, Mr. Smith, Mr. Sadagov, Mr. Pembleton, and Ms. Brasington. Thank you for taking the time to express those concerns. I'm going to make a motion to deny the variances based on staff.
Is it okay to? Oh, am I still on speaker?
Yeah, the discussion is now over. We are now in committee and we are making a decision. So just unmute yourself and you're welcome to stay and listen.
I'll continue.
Go ahead.
I'll continue my motion to deny the variances based on staff's recommendation that they do not maintain the intent of the zoning bylaw or official plan, as the proposed development does not support the framework previously approved within the North Oakville East Secondary Plan. The requested variances are not desirable for the development within the surrounding neighborhood and are not minor in nature, as the proposed variances result in a change of use, which is not appropriate within the context of the area and the policy regime. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in... Oh, go ahead, Mr. Flemington. Did you have something to add?
Yeah, not to add, I just want to say that I am in support of this motion pretty much for the few things that I stated there. I think that, the planning is laid out, and buyers should be aware as to what is being built in that neighborhood. Unfortunately, as we've heard tonight, some of those people weren't. But I do think that in denying this motion, it'll lead to some space that can be used by the many in that neighborhood. So anyway, I'm in support of the motion.
Apologies.
Thank you.
I know it's not my turn, but I do have to say, I think there was a misunderstanding on my end. I do support the motion.
Okay, I have no idea who is speaking. Who is speaking?
Sorry, it's Jennifer.
Okay, Ms. Brasington, I've already, no. I've already told you how the procedure bylaws govern this committee. We've heard everything that has been said by the committee. We've heard everything that's been said by the neighbors, as well as the applicant. Now we're taking the matter into committee to decide on the application, which are the two variances which are being requested. And the town is also not in support of them. So us as a committee are making our decision right now. There is no room for further questions or discussions. What I will do, and if you had given me a moment before we interrupted, I will ask Ms. McEwen to further provide information to all the neighbors as much as possible within her purview. So just please do not interrupt the procedure anymore, and let us conclude, and then we will get you as much information as possible following that. Sorry for the interruption. So we've heard Ms. Murray's motion. Mr. Flemington reiterated his support. All those in support of a denial of the variances and the application as applied for. Okay, so the application has been denied. None opposed to the motion to deny. Ms. McEwen, I imagine that since we've denied this application, that you may come in with another one, and if it's at all possible, to make sure that the neighbors in the area are included in any further discussion with the owners. And since both blocks are owned by Mattamy and they also purchased their homes from Mattamy, I trust that you can reiterate to the developer that there's a lot of disconnect and discomfort and disappointment in the neighborhood, and that they should work together for the betterment of the neighbors and the neighborhood. And I'll leave that with you.
Thank you.
I've lost my train of thought. So we are going to, Madam Secretary, did you get all of that? You got the motion? You got that it was denied and there were none opposed?
Yes, I did, Madam Chair.
Okay, very well. Thank you, everyone, for your submissions, and we are going to move to our next matter on our agenda. If you'd be kind enough to bring Mr. Talowski back in, I'll wait for you to do that and notify me, please. Mr. Hassan, if anything does come back with the respect to this application, the same circle of people will be notified, correct?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, under the provincial regulations and under the Planning Act, notice is provided to abutting property owners within 60 meters of the property, and signs are posted on site.
Very well. Thank you. I needed you to say that on record for everyone to be aware of. Okay, Mr. Talowski, thank you for coming back. We have the next item on our agenda right now is CAV 069 of 2021, and it's at 640 Truedale Court. Again, It's CAV 069 of 2021 at 640 Truedale Court. The number to call if you're interested in speaking to this application is 905-815-6095. Again, 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. Ms. McPhee, how are you?
Good, thank you.
You are the listed agent?
Yes,
Go
my
ahead.
name's Cindy McPhee. I'm the agent for the homeowners at 640 Truedale Court. We are requesting one variance for a front yard setback. We feel like we have a minor request for our existing home where we're proposing a side addition, but also want to add on to the front of the existing bungalow with a front porch and trying to move forward the front foyer. And in such, we have triggered a variance to the front yard. So they are located on a pie-shaped lot in the corner of a crescent, and the front yard property line is circular. So when we offset the required front yard setback, this green portion that's highlighted in this diagram is what is the variance, and that's what we're requesting to be approved today.
Very well, thank you for your submission. Are there any questions or items of clarification of Ms. McPhee at this time? I see none. Has anyone called in for this application, Ms. Secretary Treasurer? Is there anyone on hold? I do note that we do have letters of support from Mr. David Nicole, Bill McIntyre, and James Sprout.
Madam Chair, I don't see anybody.
Okay, very well. So then we will take the matter into committee. Who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, reviewed the written staff report and materials submitted in support of the application, in addition to having heard the comments from the agent for the owner, I am satisfied that the requested variance conforms with the four tests of the Act, noting that there is a minimal encroachment into the required front yard and that the resultant building, including addition and front porch, will be generally in line with the abutting properties. I'll put forward a motion of approval, subject to, my apologies, two standard conditions, those being that the additions be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan, number 7, dated 2021-04-12, and the elevation drawings number 6, dated 2021-04-12, and that the approval will expire within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note that there were 3 letters of support submitted with respect to this matter.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. Thank you, Ms. McPhee.
Thank
Have
you.
a good night.
You too.
Okay, we're moving on to application CAV 070 of 2021 at 23 Washington Avenue. Again, it's CAV 070 2021 at 23 Washington Avenue. If you are interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference. Good evening, Mr. El-Rawi.
Good evening, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is Rai Rawi from Professional Floor Plans. I'm the agent of the application. I live at 5147 Preservation Circle, Mississauga, Ontario. We are seeking one minor variance for the floor area ratio for this proposal for a newly built house. The reason for the request of the floor area ratio is that the actual lot size is much smaller than even what the zoning bylaw is asking for. So I need to have a decent house that fits the client needs would need some variances. It looks like it's a huge percentage from 43% to 50%. But actually, even with this 50%, if we go to the parent bylaw, we'll find it's less than the 43% total area if the lot size was at a normal lot size. We worked with Mr. Hassan and their staff for a number of iterations, trying to achieve what is the consent and the streetscape of this neighborhood without encroaching to any changes. And the client was flexible, so we changed fully the elevations and made sure we have two preceding cases in the abutting properties, which asked for a similar size of variance, and they were approved. And this is why we are moving in front of you with confidence that you will support us. We recognize there was a letter of objection that received yesterday from one of the neighbors. And I think this explanation that we are not asking for something extraordinary or not meeting the consent of the streetscape. And we have canceled any open to below spaces so that the full space is fully utilized, so that we don't have a large scale or large mass of this house. And we kept all the other setbacks, the heights and coverage all within the requirements. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arawi, for your submission. Are there any questions or items of clarification of Mr. Arawi at this time? I see none. We recognize that there is a letter of opposition from Catherine Davis, and there was a request to attend by Yun Lee. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in for this application? And if there is anyone in attendance who would like to speak to this application, please raise your hand so the Secretary Treasurer can invite you as an attendant.
I don't see anybody.
Okay. Give it another 30 seconds or so. Okay, who would like to start the ball rolling and provide us with a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Flemington.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to approve the motion as applied for of the variances requested, having reviewed the application submitted by the applicant, and also noting that the town staff report is in support of the application. Also taking into account the comments made by the applicant's agent today. I believe there were 3 letters in support of this application, and that there was 1 letter of opposition or email of opposition for this application. But I do note that it meets all 4 tests of the Planning Act, that is minor in nature and keeping with development in the neighborhood. I would like to apply 2 conditions: that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevations, revised 01 dated April 15th, 2021. And our standard condition that the approval expires 2 years from the date of the decision if a building permit has not been issued for the proposed construction.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Flemington. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support?
Mr.
Oh. Yeah, sorry, I didn't see. All those did someone ask?
Sherry, I saw John raising the hand, so I don't know if he supported the motion or he wants to add something.
I'm going to say it again because I was lagging too. Something glitched on my end as well, so I didn't see everybody. The motion was to approve as applied for, following the conditions that are set forth with the related elevations and site plans as cited. All those in support? Okay. None opposed, Ms. Secretary Treasurer. The application has been approved.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Arawi.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening.
You too. Okay, next item on our agenda is a CAV 071 of 2021 at 341 McDonald Road. Again, it's CAV 071 of 2021 at 341 McDonald Road. Anyone is interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conferencing. Am I pronouncing this correct, Mr. Khosravi?
That is correct. My name is Azman Khosravi. Madam Chair, pleasure to see you again, members of the committee and staff. My name is Azman Khosravi. I live in 1328 Stonecutter Drive in Oakville. I'm the agent for the owner, and tonight I'm presenting you with our application. In this application, what we're doing actually, we're adding partially extending the second floor of an existing second floor. We've been partially extended, adding a mudroom in the garage. What causes the variance that we're asking is nothing that we're doing at the moment. The two variances that we're asking is related to an existing non-compliance condition that we have. The house, as you see, we have a lot coverage overage that we have about 2.2% overage with respect to 19% lot coverage that we're supposed to have. As we're building on top of the footprint of the building, actually, we're not causing this condition. This is an existing non-compliance that we rather trying to recognize and verify. The second variance that we're asking, again, is not something that is caused as a result of this development. The side setbacks on either side is 1.8 meters by the special provision of the bylaw. And currently we have about 1.56 and 1.52 meter on either side. Again, an existing condition for the existing house that is not triggered as a result of the development, but we have to recognize and verify it.
Very well, thank you, Mr. Khosravi. Are there any items of clarification or questions at this time? I see none. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in for this application or requested to speak? If there's anyone in attendance who's raised their hand?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Who would like to move a motion? Ms. Murray, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, through you. Having conducted my site visit and reviewed the applicant's written submission as well as the town staff's written report, which I note the staff is in support of, having also taken into account the comments presented by the applicant this evening. As well as I note, there was no one online to speak to this application for or against, and there appears to be no submissions written for or against the submission at this time. I'm prepared to make a motion and I'm satisfied that the minor variance application meets all four tests under the Planning Act. And it is based on the fact that the existing footprint of the dwelling is not being altered as a result of this proposal. Rather, the request to variance is to recognize the existing non-conforming size. So the conditions set forth to support the variances is that the additions be constructed in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings revision number 1 dated 07/04/2021, and that the approval expires 2 years from the date of a decision if a building permit has not been issued. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Very well. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Thank you, Mr. Khosravi. Have a good night.
Thank you very much. Have a good night.
Application CAV 074 of 2021 at 120 Morden Road. Again, it's CAV 074 of 2021 at 120 Morden Road. If there's anyone who's interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Good evening, Mr. Smith. Go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brent Smith. Good evening. I'm here on behalf of Hassan alum for 120 Morden Road, and requesting a minor variance for the minimum front yard, 905 meters, where we require 11.95. For the house design, we were trying to maintain in the sort of location of the existing house, but just where it kind of notches in at the back left corner, it's, we can't push it back much further without it getting really close to that corner, so we want to pull back. Pull forward a bit. Yeah, that's just the variance we're requesting there. But yes, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to ask or answer.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Are there any items of clarifications or questions at this time? Okay, I see none. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, has anyone called in for this application?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay. We'll just give it another minute because Mr. Smith's presentation was brief. Okay, who would like to move a motion? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle, thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Having undertaken my site visit, reviewed the written materials, including the drawings and the written staff report, and having heard the brief presentation by the applicant, I would put forward a motion of approval, finding that the requested variance conforms to 4 tests of the Act. The motion should be subject to 2 conditions, those being that the dwelling be built in general accordance with the submitted site plan and elevation drawings number 2 dated 2 March of 2020, and that the approval expires within 2 years of the date of the decision if a permit has not been issued. I would note that there were no members of the public present with respect to this matter, and there were no letters, no written submissions provided in advance of the hearing.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Hardcastle. Is there discussion on this recommendation? I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved. None opposed. Thank you, Mr. Smith. Have a good night.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're looking at application CAV 075 of 2021 at 164 Douglas Avenue. Again, the application is CAV 075 of 2021 at 164 Douglas Avenue. I have if you're interested in speaking to this application, please call 905-815-6095. Again, the number is 905-815-6095. Staff will be standing by to take your call and provide you with further instructions to join the video conference at that time. I have Mr. Terrence Glover as the agent.
Yes, hello.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. I won't take much of your time. The committee has reviewed an app. Oh, sorry, I just went full screen here. I lost all my stuff. There we go. So again, I won't take much of your time. The committee has reviewed a similar application back a year or so ago, 2 years ago. At that time, the addition was on the other side of the house. If the Secretary Treasurer can advance us to the current application, this is the, there you go, right there. So back a couple years ago, the application again was for under 45-1, and it was for an addition on the back of the house on the other side of the house. The committee approved that, essentially the same type of variances that we're going for today. However, today we're on the other side, and I'll explain why that is. And subsequent to that approval, it was appealed by the landowner to the north, abutting the north. As a part of that appeal, as part of that resolution, I guess, to that appeal, the owner, the client of this property, 164, has made an agreement with the property owner to the north, and they redesigned the building now to move everything down to the southern rear portion of the house to mitigate the issues that were contentious, I guess, as part of the appeal. Furthermore, the applicant and the owner to the north have come to a private agreement, and as part of that private agreement, there's a condition that the committee should appreciate. The committee adjustment, the Secretary Treasurer may want to take note of this. So I'll read the condition as it states. It starts off with Mark Liptok. So Liptok agrees to, and Liptok is the applicant here. Liptok agrees to only pursue redevelopment of the subject property in accordance with the revised plans. The variances listed on Schedule B here to this agreement, which are the variances that are before you today. Liptok agrees to request the Committee of Adjustment or any other approval authority to impose, pursuant to Section 45(9) of the Plan Act, the following condition on any approval of the variances listed at Schedule B to this agreement. The condition reads as follows. Approval of the variances is conditional upon any buildings and or structure on the subject property being built strictly in accordance with the revised plans, being the plans prepared by Stephen Brousseau Design, dated April 19th, 2021, and attached here to a Schedule A, which I believe are the plans that you have in front of you. Liptok further agrees to advise the Committee of Adjustment or any other approval authority that this condition to approval of the variances is fundamental term of the settlement reached between Liptok and Carlson, which is the property owner to the north. So that's the, there's a full agreement, and through this agreement, the property owner to the north, Ms. Carlson, who previously appealed the previous Committee of Adjustment decision, now supports the application. Further to that, we have neighbors to the south at 160, who's really the most impacted by this development. There's a letter to you which in support of this application. And then there's a property across the street, again, in support of this application. I'll point out that there are two properties that are in opposition to this. The one is on the opposite side of the block, so basically you have to go around the block to get to it. And the other one is just north of this property on the other block. And their comments are general comments that general interest and general objections, I guess. One of them is that everybody should be treated equally. Therefore, one person on the block has it, everybody should be able to have it. And that objection is moot, I guess, because everybody is able to apply to the Committee of Adjustment to do this if they choose to. So everybody is being treated equally here. Secondly, there's a concern about the size of the building, the floor space. Perhaps it's inappropriate. And staff in the last application that was approved by the Committee of Adjustment, as well as this application before you today, staff are in support of that, and we, through our justification report, also agree that it's not really inappropriate. It fits within the character of the neighborhood. And the only difference here is the starting lot area is a little bit smaller than the rest of it. Therefore, it throws the dimensions out of whack. But visually, when you look at this thing, it's not going to really look any different than any other building on the site, other than the backyard's a little bit smaller, which you can't really tell unless you're in the backyard per se. So the three variances before you today, we've applied under section 45.1, which is the traditional 4 tests. And then we've applied under section 45.2, which is the extension of legal non-conforming use. We were appealed last time, and it became an issue at the LPAT, or OMB used to be, whether this was a 45.1 or 45.2. So in our justification, we put both forward, and we're hoping that the committee would, if you see it so fit to approve this application, that you approve it under 45.1 and you approve it under 45.2, because we believe that it satisfies both of it. It is an extension of legal non-conforming use, because without these variances, without the grandfathering of the house, which was built in the early 1900s, the house does not conform with the zoning bylaw. Therefore, the house itself and the use inside it is legal non-conforming. We're asking for a legal non-conforming extension because this addition will grant an extension to that. Conversely, section 45.1, the 4 tests, you know them very well. We believe that each of these variances meet those 4 tests very simply. The addition is for the purpose of improving the house. Obviously, the house is built in 1900. It's not up to today's standards in terms of livability, room sizes, etc. The owner has had this house for a year or so, and he wants to move in this. He's not flipping or anything. He wants to live here. He's trying to make this house up to today's standards in terms of usability. So that's what these additions are for, to change the layout of these things. Again, staff have supported us in the past C of A application. Staff have supported us today in today's application. The justification is laid out for you as to why it should be. We asked the committee, with all due respect, if you would approve this application under section 45.1, as well as under 45.2, in case there is an appeal by any means. Thank you very much. I'm here to answer any questions you have.
Okay.
Madam
Thank you,
Chair?
Mr. Glover. Is there any questions or items of clarification of Mr. Glover at this time?
Madam Chair.
I see your hand, Mr. Hassan.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, at the appropriate time, I had actually received an email to the extent that Mr. Glover was explaining the revised condition 1. And at the appropriate time, I can read it. My understanding was that there was specific wording in more of a summary consents language from our legal staff. So I can read that out at the appropriate time if we get to that point.
Okay, very well. I've noted that. Thank you. All right. Are there any questions or items of clarification from the committee to Mr. Glover? Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was looking for clarity. The agreement that was executed between the property owner and the northerly abutting property owner, was that in accordance and with a LPAT or OMB decision? And was that filed under that appeal, or was that a separate decision in advance of and separate from a decision of the committee? Of the LPAT.
The agreement is totally independent of LPAT. There was no decision. There was no direction. As a matter of fact, as part of the decision process of my client, the owner of 164, he withdrew his application from LPAT, so that for the point of reapplying under section 45.2, as well as 45.1, and to negotiate, or negotiate is not the right word, to rectify or to mend the relationship with the owner to the north, and to address her concerns and come up with a better design. And essentially what you have before you is actually superior design than what was there before. And that was only achieved through, unfortunately, the objection of the Ms. Carlson to the north. So to answer your question, this agreement signed between my client, Mr. Liptok, and Mrs. Carlson, independent totally of LPAT OMB.
Thank you, Mr. Glover. Can, Madam Chair, may I ask a question of staff then?
Yes, please go ahead.
Mr. Hassan, do I understand, based on your comments then, that you are putting forth a revised condition 1 from that which is contained within the written staff report?
Yeah, through Madam Chair, sorry, my internet's just off the fritz again. I heard what you're saying. In terms of the condition, maybe, Madam Chair, if I may, I can read it out now. It's generally a summary of the condition that Mr. Glover had noted.
Go ahead. I would like to write it down as well for further.
Okay, hopefully you can hear me and my Wi-Fi doesn't cut out. But so the condition that I received from legal staff was that approval of the variances is conditional upon any buildings and or structure on the subject property being built strictly in accordance with the plans prepared by Stephen Rousseau Design dated April 19th, 2021 that are attached to the minutes of settlement dated May 17th, 2021 between the owners of 164 and 168 Douglas and have been submitted to the Committee of Adjustment for approval. So that was the condition, which I believe is a general summary of what Mr. Glover had said from our legal staff who participated in the LPAT proceedings.
But I'm sorry, I'm a little confused. I thought that you said that the application was withdrawn from LPAT. So what are the minutes of settlement then? Go ahead, Mr. Glover.
It was withdrawn. This agreement has nothing to do with LPAT, other than at LPAT we agreed to withdraw our application so we could go back to the drawing board, rework this. As part of that reworking, we came to a private agreement with Ms. Carlson and my client, Mr. Liptak, to resolve these matters so that she would be satisfied with this new development and she would not appeal again the application if it's approved by committee today. So
okay,
we were just hedging our bets so we won't get an appeal and we have a superior design because of it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Hassan, then there should be no mention of the LPAT in that condition then.
Yeah, through Madam Chair, there's no mention of the LPAT in the condition I just read. It's just minutes of settlement is the term that I'm looking at in the document that I've been provided. And the document is provided by Weersfold, and I believe they were the agent or solicitor for Ms. Carlson, who was the appellant. And again, this was forwarded to me directly from our legal staff.
Okay,
so
thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, the private agreement looks like it's being termed as a minutes of settlement. I'm not sure if that helps clarify, but
we can put it in that package.
Between the parties then.
That's the language that was used, so we would agree to that language. And we agreed to the condition as it was portrayed by Mr. Hassan.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle. You had a follow-up question?
Yeah, yes, I was attempting to understand if this was not, if this agreement between two parties was not a matter under the Planning Act, condition of the LPAT. I'm looking for some clarification as to why legal would be putting forth a condition that is much more specific and detailed than our normal conditions, why they would be weighing in on this where our general condition achieves the general intent and purpose of the commitment between the two parties. So I'm looking for a little bit of clarity from you with respect to that.
I see Mr. Glover's hands up. He may be able to respond while I'm looking through the document.
Mr. Hassan, I've actually asked that question of you. It's a question for staff why legal and town staff would be putting forward a revised condition.
So through you, Madam Chair, the document that I'm looking at is the exact same plans that the committee has received through this circulation. The only difference that I'm looking at on these plans is that there's some red lines that say areas where no exhaust vents will be located. So to that further extent, those air vents aren't regulated under the zoning bylaw. So they're probably specific items that the appellant in that situation was looking for in terms of the plans that are in front of you now.
Okay, go ahead, Mr. Hardcastle.
Sorry, Ms. Murray, I know you're trying to get a question in. I'm looking, I'm a little bit concerned, or maybe I'm looking to ask a further question in terms of, normally we use the framing of general accordance to allow for building permit reviews, which may require minor alterations to things like, things that might not be regulated or or dealt with by the variances that we're looking at, but may require minor adjustment. And if this hasn't undertaken a fulsome building permit review, we may find ourselves with a condition that forces this applicant right back in front of us because they've made a revision that somebody cannot determine to be in exact accordance. I'm sorry, I'm in strict accordance with the drawings.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, actually, I don't dispute that at all. There's many instances where building permit submissions and the technical plans that are provided through that review result in minor deviations from plans that are submitted through the committee of adjustment. So I don't dispute that at all. And that's a very good point.
Can I say something?
Okay, go ahead. Yeah, just give me a second. Let me hear what Ms. Murray has to say, and then we'll piggyback on to that point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm seeking clarification. So the agreement is between two parties, and the two parties happen to be the current owners. And what should happen with that agreement should the properties be sold? Are we to uphold those conditions? Are those conditions null and void? What then happens? So I'm struggling with that a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, my response to that would be, again, in terms of the more concise and condensed wording that I received from legal, taking out the actual owners' names, I believe would deal with that matter, especially noting that it specifically references the properties themselves.
Okay,
Madam
thank
Chair.
you.
Sorry, Madam Chair.
Yes.
Mark Liptok wants to speak.
Yes, I see his hand up, and I wanted to finish that point and then let him comment in case Ms. Murray had something further to add to that. Go ahead, Mr. Liptok.
No, I just wanted to make a quick point that when you addressed the, I think, who was it there? John Hardcastle mentioned the building permit. There's a provision in the contract that talks about the fact that, we can't go forward with, the site plan the way it is. We got to have, like you said, exactly why the wording's in there to address minor flexibility in the building permit. So there is a condition that specifically addresses that it's going to be based on the facts, the end engineering drawings and final building permit. That, so yes, believe you me, we spent more time on this than it's worth, but the document covers all the flexibility that we all need.
Okay. Any further questions or items of
Sorry, if you
clarification?
want a copy of the agreement, I can send it to you too, so it doesn't matter to me.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Talowski?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to agree with Mr. Hardcastle's line of questioning. It seems peculiar for the committee to be asked to impose a specific condition that was agreed to by third parties that with drawings that weren't presented to the committee and negotiations that the town wasn't part of. So I'm going to ask both the applicant and Mr. Hassan whether making the condition to the satisfaction of the director of planning and the applicant ensuring that he does permit application drawings and submits those to get the director's approval, whether that would satisfy the intent here.
Also, Mr. Hassan, if you're going to comment on Mr. Talowski's question, was the town provided with this agreement? Are you privy to the details of it, or just the application and you were told about the...
To you, Madam Chair, I actually was kicked out of the meeting for the last 30 seconds, so I missed, unfortunately, what was said.
Okay, so Mr. Talowski is reiterating Mr. Hardcastle's point about having a third-party condition placed, and he was suggesting that we leave it to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning, because it is strange for us to impose such a condition. And then as a follow-up to that question, I was wondering whether you had access to the agreement that Mr. Liptak was offering to send it to the committee.
Yeah, through you, Madam Chair, the only addition I would make if the committee is inclined to make that modification to the condition is that we include legal staff as well, because legal staff was heavily involved in the LPAT proceedings. In instances where town staff are supportive and the committee approves an application and there's a third party appeal, in this instance it was, legal staff attend the hearings to enforce that if the LPAT in its wisdom approves the application, that they approve it with the conditions that the committee set out. So I actually wasn't involved directly in that process. And to the second question that you asked, unfortunately, I haven't seen that agreement.
If I could,
okay, so were you just, sorry, Mr. Glover, give me a chance for 1 second. Were you just directed by legal to follow this train of thought, as in when the application came before you, you were directed by planning that you had to approve it or support it, but with those conditions? So no, legal was involved from the start?
Through you, Madam Chair, not necessarily. We take every application, notwithstanding the history and the previous file and the LPAT tribunal proceedings, staff take each application on its own merits, especially knowing that this application is slightly different based on where the addition is going. So I provided my comments in support just based on a review of what was submitted. In relation to the condition that I read out, I got that at 6:07 p.m., so just 55 minutes or so before the meeting. So there wasn't a lot of time to discuss actually what was to be reviewed. I would just advise that I should bring this to the committee's attention.
Okay, thank you. On that note, Mr. Glover, can you shed some light as to the procedure by which we ended up in this position?
Yes, and I appreciate everybody's comment. It is highly unusual. Note that legal staff did support this, and there's a whole sordid history to it. Essentially, what you need to know is there was, I tried to be as politically correct as possible. You'll note, if you see the agreement, there's an exchange of $5,000, and there's an exchange of agreement that Mr. Liptak will not do certain things, and that's to satisfy Ms. Carlson, so she will not appeal this. So if you can understand the dynamics of what has transpired here, Mr. Liptak has done everything he can, bent over backwards, and then some, beyond yoga, to appease Ms. Carlson, and she's, in my opinion, my professional opinion, she's getting loads and loads of benefit from this, which she would not normally get. And she used the objective of an appeal to secure these goods or services or conditions. My client is desperately needed to get this approved so he can move into his house. He's been stuck for 1.5 years without being able to move into this house because he can't get the work done. Ms. Carlson has threatened appeal. We have done everything that we can to appease her. This just was settled hours before this meeting tonight. That's why it was just before your planner. Legal looked at it, they endorsed it because they understand what we have been through with this through the appeal. Frankly, we need this condition in there to satisfy this, but if it meant the committee is going to refuse this, personally, I don't care if you have this condition in here or not, because it's just to appease another party who may appeal us. But what we're trying to do is to create an environment where there's an approval and there's no appeal. That's the best planning process available. If you don't put the condition in, it may leave her the ability to appeal this application and prolong it even further. If you put this condition in, which is adequate and satisfactory to my client, there will be no appeal from this person through this agreement. So there is a sordid history here. There is some perhaps manipulation or whatever going on here, but both parties have agreed to it so that we can continue on and my client can get his building permits, build this and move into this house. He's been sitting on it for a couple of years now and have the carrying cost of it, and he's just stuck. I hope that answers your question. I can further detail if you have any further questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Are there any further questions or items of clarification? Okay, I see none. Is there anyone standing by to speak to this application or has raised their hand, Ms. Secretary Treasurer?
No, Madam Chair.
Okay, and I do note the letters of support as well as the letters of opposition that we have received, and we're aware of them. So let's start the discussion then and have the matter taken into committee and start the ball rolling. Who would like to move a motion? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Talowski.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm trying to start this discussion by probably misquoting the preamble to tonight's meeting. This process is not intended to resolve disputes between parties. This is to apply the 4 tests of the Planning Act. Fifth test of the Planning Act is not whether or not 2 adjacent property owners have a third-party agreement or not, and information that the committee is not, and town staff is not privy to. Having said that, it's always good when adjacent property owners can come to a resolution. I don't see very much difference at all between the requested condition and the standard condition, as Mr. Hardcastle said. So, Madam Chair, I believe this application deserves to be approved tonight, and the applicant should be applauded for trying to work things out with the neighbor, but I don't think the process they're trying to achieve their third-party result in is this one. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to move that this application be approved as applied for. I believe it does meet the tests of both Section 45.1 of the Planning Act with respect to the side yard setback, not having a impact, and with respect to expansion of the existing non-conforming uses. I do believe that they are similar to what exists today and not creating a more intensive use on the property. I'll note that the 2 immediately adjacent neighbors to the north and south and the most impacted are supporting this application. With respect to the objections, the objectors are essentially seeking a neighborhood rezoning, and they are not speaking at all to what the impacts of this particular variance are. So I I'm swayed more by the immediately adjacent neighbors than the objectors. Madam Chair, I move the application be approved. I will make the first condition that the dwelling be built in general accordance with site plans and elevations to the satisfaction of the Director of Planning and Town Solicitor, and that the approval expires within 2 years if a building permit has not been issued.
45.1 and 45.2, please.
Yes, I did say that earlier. Please don't interrupt the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Talowski. Is there a discussion on this recommendation? Okay, I see none. All those in support? Okay, the application has been approved, none opposed. Okay, have a good night.
Thank you.
We have no minutes to confirm, so I'm just looking for a motion to adjourn. Okay, Mr. Hardcastle's hand went up first. Thank you, Ms. Murray. We are adjourned. Ms. Secretary Treasurer, can you please let me know when we're offline?